And here we go.
Here we are, another episode.
Neurotic terrain. It's an endless terrain.
Yeah, absolutely.
Vast
terrain.
Vast, extensive, barren terrain. It's not barren. I guess it's actually densely populated. It's a densely populated. So.
Yeah. But maybe Werner Herzog said about the jungle. He's like, it's a place of fornication and murder. Yeah. I watched this movie where that poor man was just tormented by that,
Klaus Kinski.
He
right?
was. Yeah. What an interesting film that was, actually. Really was. But maybe we're dealing with a jungle out there and in here.
It seems to be ever more like a jungle, and the idea that at some point or another it wasn't may have just been a fantasy.
I try to comfort myself with the feeling that think about the hour. I'll like watching a thing on the Dust Bowl, like a documentary on the Dust Bowl times, and just trying to remind myself that there have been many urgent times in our history, and this is just another one.
Yeah, absolutely.
It is unprecedented on some levels. There's some scariness going down. No doubt.
Big time. Yeah. But the jungle has its moments of relative calm, so the idea that even during the periods where you don't have an obvious intensification of difficulty, that we're not fundamentally still in the jungle, I think, maybe we always really have never, maybe we never really left the jungle.
Yeah. I thought I had about our meeting today. If I'll introduce it and see how it tastes. All right. Is that all right?
Great.
So I'm very tired today, right?
Me too.
I was kept up by a young earthling last night. And, but I noticed that in psychotherapeutic work, and maybe I think in music work too, that when I'm tired, I am more scattered and more split ends with hair, like frayed mentally. But also I'm so much more loose. And as a result, I'm able to pick up on a signal that when I'm with it, I can't pick up on. And it's a good signal. Thoughts and sounds and responses to other people are more crystalline and pure and less tainted by the kind of interference of my sort of grasping mind that I have when I'm more rested.
Yeah, I've been thinking about the exact same thing, because I had a gig that I had to play when I got virtually no sleep the night before and had a splitting headache, and it was just oh wow, I don't know if I can do this,
Yeah.
And it was a hot day, and the sun was really bright, reflecting off of the sheet of music. It's blindingly and painful, and it was pretty good, actually. I played maybe a little better than normal at times. There were some really nice things that happened. I still felt like crap, but there is something that happens when we don't have the energy to maintain our standard construction of reality, and you're just sort of having to deal with things as they are without all of that extra polish that you would normally put on something when you have the energy to clean yourself up. And I don't know.
Yeah.
So what are you thinking about all of that? How is that?
It kind of reminds me, metaphorically, of kind of an uptight teacher during recess, sort of trying to structure the kids' play in a way that makes it not as fun or as good,
Sure.
And we have this internal sort of auditor or kind of organizer at its worst. It's the old punitive superego that is just a sort of shame generator and critic, like a heckler almost. But even in milder forms, it's just this kind of it's just sort of a running commentary on everything we're doing, and also like kind of like expectations of how a given things ought to go, you know?
Yeah.
And that's kind of not dancing in a creative and spontaneous way, really,
Yeah.
is it? You know,
Oh, it's the kiss of death if you know where you're going in improvisational music, right?
totally. Yeah.
Uh, so that's like, leaping into the void. That's the hardest thing about uh, truly improvising. Getting up in front of people and not knowing what you're going to do. That can be kind of a terrifying experience, especially the first few times you try it. I remember the same thing happening in push hands. You know,
Uh-uh.
uh, push hands is a kind of competitive form of Tai Chi. And
Hmm.
I remember when I realized that what I had to do was to stop trying to control the situation. It was like, yeah, I realized it, but then I had to actually do it. In push hands, if you try to make something happen, you're screwing up. You're basically
Right.
responding to what's going on, and you can't have a formulated notion of precisely what that response is going to be, except that you're going to be relaxed. You're going to be aligned. You're going to be breathing. You know, um, and there are a variety of other sort of principles that you're going to follow. But anything kind of specific in terms of having like a roadmap, like knowing what the plan is, that's not going to work. And yeah, it's the same thing in music. And it's an uncomfortable place to inhabit, even though in some respects it's so much more comfortable. It's a weird thing. I don't know exactly why we're so uncomfortable with that reality, but it's sort of like being in the jungle.
Right.
It's like you don't know what's going to happen.
Oh
Like
man.
anything could happen at any moment, right? It
Yeah.
may seem peaceful,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
but anything can happen at any moment. And so you better be prepared at any moment for anything to happen, which doesn't mean that you're going to be like thinking about all the things that could happen. It kind of just means like, I'm going to breathe. I'm going to relax. I'm going to do the various things that I know I need to do in order to be most responsive to the circumstance if it changes.
And yet you still got to plan for dinner in order to go.
Not in the jungle. In the jungle, you're just kind of looking to see if dinner shows up.
Right. Or you are dinner, you know. But
What you're saying actually explains a lot. I mean, maybe in a way, like regular meals is the thing that takes us away from reality more than anything else.
oh yeah. Well now you're tooting the old horn of like, you know, first world life or like modern life took away an authenticity of living, you know, that
Which
like,
which means that it's not really the first world. It's kind of like it's the end part of the whatever this world is. Because if you're out of touch with reality, you're on your way out.
yeah, yeah. Isn't it weird? Like the idea that like we could say all this, but the profound adjustment that it would take for me to live with nature and the land, and as they say, and like just have to plan staying warm, just have to attend to Maslow's lower level of the pyramid stuff. Like the amount of difficulty and you know, I have a feeling though, I've always sort of dreamed about it, but that's just like somebody who's so far from that idealizing it rather and dreaming about it, you know, like I think it's probably pretty stark and pretty scary most of the time, maybe at least half of the time.
I mean, I think you're confronted with a different set of existential challenges. Like instead of worrying about the work and the money and time and you know all the various things that are kind of part of the structured, let's say, you know, whatever this thing that isn't the jungle, what are we going to call it? The civilization? Is that what it is?
I guess so. Yeah.
So, instead of those things, you're kind of more uh you're more like, well, you got to get comfortable with the idea that, life could end at any moment. I may not be able to get enough food together to make it through the winter. I may get some kind of a illness or an injury that I can't resolve myself, you
Hmm.
know? But
That's a biggie.
those are just sort of like, that's just like reality baseline stuff, right? I met this guy when we were in Mexico who was living in in like a little sort of, it wasn't even a park. It was sort of like a little area of a couple of trees and some ground that was an indistinct kind of, what property it was. It was sort of next to a path that went through the
Hmm.
woods.
Hmm.
And he was a really interesting visual artist. He had created these incredible sculptures that have a photograph of somewhere. And a very interesting guy. And he told me that he was living in the city and that he got ill and he just felt like he had to get out of the city because he didn't want to die in the city, you know. And he found this little spot and he kind of set up and he didn't die. He was expecting to die. Uh, and so then he was like confronted with the problem of like, well, how do I live here?
Well,
you know, uh, he was definitely just very much on the edge of life and super interesting. I think like he was still struggling with some health problems. He was trying to figure out if he could do a little bit of work around there. He's basically living out of a car or a van or something like that. And he had like a little outdoor kind of setup where he had a table and a couple of pieces of like furniture and a little cook stove and stuff like that. Very simple. Um, I mean, it's kind of great and terrible at the same time. You know what I mean? And that I think is, in a way, that's the story of life, no matter how you do it.
yeah,
It's
yeah,
like
it's really true. That's parenting.
whether
Great and
you go
terrible.
if you go full on civilization or if you go
Yeah,
full on jungle or anywhere in between,
yeah,
it's
yeah.
like life is great and terrible at the same time. And the things that are most terrifying are the ones you're least accustomed to.
And I guess, yeah, it's true. You're right. I think once you would adjust, there's this guy who walks around the sort of slightly more urban, sprawly area I live in. And I'm basically up in the mountains in the Northeast, but a sort of New Englandy mountains. So there's towns and some of the towns have sprawl and stores and like big grocery stores and stuff. And this fellow walks. I think he's homeless. I've never spoken to him, but he walks around with like a dowel, like a big thick stick, or piece of wood on his back, and two reusable shopping bags, or I think two on each side.
Hmm.
Um, just walking around, and he's looks like he a little haggard or disheveled, but also looks pretty hardy. And then I've seen him up close. I'll see him at different times, like even like in March when it's pretty crappy out here. I was filling up my gas tank, and there he was. Like he was clearly sort of using the mobile station as a kind of cleanup moment, get your morning started kind of deal. And I just, I can tell there's a lot of, just like there's plenty of habitat for the animals around here. I mean, my God, just the other day, a little adolescent black bear just, kind of went across the road in front of me, and there's plenty of space to go and live out there.
Yeah.
And then it makes you think, like, where do animals sleep? Like, where do coyotes sleep? Like, where do they go? Do they have like a spot that and it's sort of like same thing with this guy. Like, where does he go? Does he set stuff up? And like, there's a tarp out there somewhere.
Yeah, there's a guy around here that I've gotten to be friendly with who's in a similar situation, and he would sleep down at the river sometimes. And I have a little group of guys who get together sometimes to do Tai Chi. So we would see him down at the river sometimes. We've woken him up a couple of times. Um, and I've given him rides around, you know, um, and he's been in all kinds of different states of kind of what's the right word? Like sometimes he smells really bad and just is really disheveled. Sometimes he's kind of gotten it together, and sometimes he seems like he's on drugs or what have you, and sometimes he's very clear-minded. Um, and I've always felt like, boy, I wish I could help him out, like I give him a few bucks every now and then, give him a ride, what have you, give him some clothes. Um, he was a foster kid at a place not too far from here, and he just kind of stuck around the area, but he doesn't have that place to stay anymore. So he just, yeah, and he'll hitchhike into town sometimes, and he was working at a local convenience store for a while, but it got sold, and so he's sort of looking for odd jobs. But I was talking with him about it, and he was basically like, I don't think I really want to like invest myself in anything here. Because I asked him, hey, what would you do if you could do anything? What would you know, what would be the thing you'd like to do? He said, well, I like welding, or being an actor.
Being an actor, he said.
Yeah.
Wow.
Uh, and so, I was thinking, okay, well, you could definitely learn welding around here. And I even, asked a friend of mine who's a welder who had recently taken some classes, if he thought there was something that would be a good program for him. And he recommended a program that's it basically they'll pay you and train you at the same time. It's like an apprenticeship program. And I mentioned it to him, and he was like, I don't think I really want to stay in Oregon. He's just like, I don't want to invest in this area.
Hmm.
He wants to go see the world. He wants to travel. I mean, he told me that 4 years ago too.
You've seen him since?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, he's still around.
Yeah. So in some ways, like sometimes it's amazing how often I see him. Like I drove into Medford, which is a pretty big town, and I had a couple of things to do, and there he is sitting on the side of the sidewalk near Fred Meyer. Um, so I see him all the time. He used to live on this road. I don't think he does anymore. Well, there's maybe one house where he stays at sometimes. I don't know. Um, but yeah, I think that's for some people. Like there was a guy who I knew who lived on the street in New York, and he told me that he preferred living on the street. It was kind of a conscious decision of him. He didn't want to have a job. He didn't want to do the rat race. He just wanted to
Yeah.
hang out and get drunk. I think that's what he liked to do. He liked to hang out and get drunk.
Fall asleep. I just
So,
saw a guy wake up on the way home from work yesterday. A friend of his came and he was on the stoop of a bank, laying down, and she woke him up and helped him get up, and he was pretty unsteady when he got up. It's really like I spent a lot of time with. I don't know if it's a lot of time, but there were a lot of times that for a Caucasian privileged kid in New York City, I think partly in reaction to guilt about that and to curiosity and anger at various things. I spent some time doing substances with homeless people and sharing their substances or getting them to buy some, various things ranging from benign to not so great.
hmm.
And there was some really interesting, there was an odd, I'll tell you, re-entering the world of normalcy, especially as a teenager who can get into some hot water and get into major trouble for being out all night in New York City. But that aside, that anxiety aside, which is really basic, I had various procedures of propping doors open and getting through ways of making noise so I could get back in undetected. But
Hmm.
it was really at times oddly freeing, and I would have this sort of, and that's in a way that's a vaguely detestable sentiment or experience I just shared, because I'm just sort of dabbling with something that is somebody else, probably suffers a great deal to have that lifestyle or didn't choose to have it.
Yeah.
Certainly a lot of the people I work with are very mentally ill, and they would do very poorly out on the street, real poorly. If you are psychotic and you are hearing voices every day, you're relatively fucked if you're out on the street.
Yeah.
You know, you're relatively screwed. It's real tough to not the paranoid ideation and the sense that everything's about you in a bad way, getting projected out into the world, and everybody walking by you and driving by you, and you can't
I
really
mean,
handle, when you're like that, you know.
yeah, I mean, the hell that some people are in is just unfathomable.
Yesterday I had one of those days as a therapist, which just whipped my ass. Like
Really,
I
yeah.
was just so uh zapped when I got home with
Huh.
human suffering. Like one client I hadn't seen her in about 6 years, and she's a recovering opioid addict who is on, an opioid replacement that, like methadone or Suboxone, and she's just neurologically having a hard time, and is such a classy, cool lady who has had such a great history with some pretty serious musical stuff, which I'm not going to mention here just out of privacy. But just to see her lonely and thin, and it's just awful, man.
Huh.
Yeah.
I mean, in some ways, like life has this arc to it where some version of that happens on the tail end, like
Yeah.
we all become in some way or another kind of decrepit, you know, uh, unable to function as well as we once did, and that trend just kind of continues on until we're done. And it is sad and frightening and kind of horrifying, particularly when you start like realizing that that's going to be your future in one way or another, unless there's just sort of an accident and all of a sudden it's over. But I think
Mhm.
kind of getting comfortable with that and recognizing the necessity of the the deterioration process so that there is room for new beings to come in. That's what Aquarius, Pisces, uh, and Aries are about. Basically, Aquarius is kind of this like you have this sense of universalism, and you understand that everything has its place, and that understanding is what gives you the ability to go, oh, okay, well, you know, I
Uh-huh.
have had my run. I'm going to be on my way out at some point or another. I should be okay with that because that's how this cycle regenerates. That's how the whole thing continues. I think in some ways, like what we're really suffering from are a bunch of people who refuse to die. They have this vision, like, and
Yeah, the age
everyone's
of
all excited.
Aquarius.
Everyone's
Yeah.
all excited, like, oh, uh, someone in their hundreds, like, wow, that's amazing. How great is that? How can
Mhm.
we make it so that everyone can live to 100? And then you have like freaking Peter Thiel going like, you know, I want to cure death,
Right. Yeah,
whatever.
yeah,
Like,
yeah, 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 exactly. Put it on a
it's
hard
like
drive somehow.
that is a recipe for death. If you cure death, that's a recipe to kill everything,
Yeah. Yeah,
you
that's
know?
really, yeah, boy, it's tough though to rent it. Do you ever I think about my longevity a lot like a car. Like sometimes, like,
That
because I've
seems to
been
be the
pretty,
most common metaphor, like what
it
everyone can
really is.
relate with.
Right. But, no, but for me, it's more like just the anxiety of like, I've been a vehicle owner relatively later in life because I grew up in the city, so I really got my I didn't get my license till I was like almost 30. And as I'd be driving around 5 years into a vehicle, it starts making noises. You can tell those are expensive noises. You don't have any bread to fix the fucking thing, and then you're like, I'm just like, and then there's just this horrible looming anxiety of like, oh man, if I don't service this thing, it's gonna die on me, and then I got no wheels. Now, I'm like, so it's just like I sort of have that with my body. Like, Jesus Christ, I got to go to a urologist. I'm definitely peeing a lot. And I don't know how much I was going to fix this thing. This just really gets to you.
I mean, I really don't like the mechanical metaphor for the body, but I suppose it's, you know, that is
What don't you
also,
like
I
about it?
think, something that encourages this sense of like, oh, okay, well, can someone just figure out how to get me a new set of tires? Like,
And then you
that's,
fix it. Yeah,
you
totally.
know what I mean?
Yeah,
That's,
yeah, 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 yeah. I was gonna say, yeah. What don't you like about it? I see. I like the way that you'll fuss with me like that. You'll be like, you know what? I don't like that. I don't like that, John. I don't like
I
that.
mean, being disagreeable is really like the key to a good conversation. If you have, a willing participant.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm a willing participant. Damn it, I'm willing. And so yeah. But okay, so what's the other way of looking at it? Like a distilled version. If you don't look at it like I need to make repairs so that I can continue to drive this life vehicle I have been given, what in what way do you think about it?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the mechanical thing suggests that there's a part that has malfunctioned. And if you just replace that part, then you're good to get back on the road, you
Yeah,
know?
sometimes that's true though, a little bit.
Ish. Yeah, I mean, sure. But, I think that a more holistic vision of it is that this is a system. The system has flows, it has,
Yeah,
parts, but it also has flows. And there's an interrelationship between all these different things. And they are alive. Like they're conscious, so like there was this woman who was a traditional Thai healer that Shang and I met when we were in Thailand, and she said that basically the key to her practice was to try to communicate with the cells so that they could be happy. And part of it is that you want to impart love to the cells of the various parts of your body so that they can feel good about what they're doing, you
right.
know? And so
Even if it's
you're
an illness.
yeah, yeah, yeah. No, I mean, like, the cells, when they're not doing what they're supposed to be doing, they're unhappy. That's the way she thinks about it. So they're like,
Uh,
if you try to find the cells that are unhappy and you try to communicate with them and to
right.
kind of figure out, like, what's making you unhappy? How can I make you feel good? You know?
Yo, okay, sorry to interject, but anyway, finish that. I'll save it. You go ahead. Sorry. Go ahead.
So I think that's a different model than the mechanical model. I think
Yeah,
it's
okay,
like,
okay.
it's a conscious model, and I think, okay, like, the thing about the jungle is that it's filled with all these different conscious things, and like the threats are mostly it's basically like there's some other entity in this environment that could get me, you know, either quickly or slowly,
Mhm.
and there's something very real about that. Like I think, probably part of the attraction of sneaking out of the house at night and hanging out with the homeless people is to just kind of get a flavor of what's going on out in this jungle.
Yeah, totally.
Like how
Yeah.
do I get out of this box
Oh,
that
yeah, it
I
was very
that
boxy. Yeah.
yeah, how do I get out of the box that I'm told I'm so lucky to be in?
Right. Yeah.
and
Yeah.
and at the very least find out why I'm lucky. You know, eh, which
Yeah.
is, there's a big element of that. Like that jungle is tough. You may not live to be, old enough to have something go wrong with your body,
Yeah. So true.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And in a way that's natural. That's probably optimally healthy, you
Right.
know,
Wait, yeah.
like
Yeah. I
for the
could have ended up in a dumpster.
biosphere.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Totally. Oh, yeah. 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 One of the reasons why I really like pathology is because
Okay.
I really do though. I do like psychologically. I don't like it physically or medically. I will admit that I have that is a fear. I'm fearful in that realm. Okay, but mental and emotional, what we would call pathology, it's a pejorative word, so I don't even really like the word. But what I like about its presence is that it really is just a part of the psyche seeking expression. That's all it is. Like I'm often really pleased to see it, not because I'm a sadist, but because I don't want people to suffer. One client accused me of being a dacrophiliac. I didn't even ever looked up the word, but it's a guy who gets off on watching people cry. You know,
Wow. Huh.
yeah,
That's a new
yeah. He
word.
wasn't angry too. He just was tooling on me. But like he's a very funny guy. But I really like to
With a good
see.
vocabulary.
Yes, I'm assuming it's a real word, but I really like to see parts of people coming out and seeking care and love and expression. It's such a good thing, and it's so that is truly paradoxical. It is a very to see somebody in the throes of dealing with post traumatic stress, weeping, terrified, why would that be something that would feel healthy? But it really is. At its core, it's just as healthy as the body getting something out of its, stomach that is not good.
Well, yeah, it's sort of like asking the cells, hey, what's really going on? Like
Right.
I need to know what's really going on so that we can get it, things in a better relationship. And then whenever you see anything doing what it really is about, like if you're observing nature and you see something that's like an expression of what's actually happening in nature, it's always miraculous, right? So that in a way is really what it is. It's like you're getting so sometimes things freeze when they're being viewed. And I think, in a way, human society is set up so that we create this persona, the mask, that is this like kind of hiding. It's a veil that prevents people from seeing what's really going on.
Yeah. Yeah. I
and
just,
and so like when you get a glimpse, it can be terrifying, but it can also be like, wow, okay, now we're here. Now we got something going on. Now we're getting real.
yeah, you're closer to a person. I have so many people that I work with they want to be a pleasure to me and me to them. They want to sort of counteract a history of bad experiences with a good experience with their therapist, and that's groovy. I'm totally into that, and and I like it too. I'm not just gratifying it, right? I like to boogie with somebody who's boogieing with me. That's great, and I'm constantly having to be a broken record and say, like, you're those vulnerable aspects of you are not only like not disliked, but they're essential to us getting closer. People don't realize that. They think that their vulnerabilities and weaknesses, if you want to even call them that, are flaws that need to be hidden or counteracted in order to be connected to somebody. But what brings you closer to somebody, you know,
I think
is
this is one of the greatest tragedies, what you're pointing to in human relationships. I think that people have a sense. It's kind of like an entertainment stimulated sense of what a relationship is supposed to be. You know,
Mhm.
it's
Yeah.
this idealized kind of like romance and or even friendship. And and as soon as like something starts to smell different, which it always does, right? You get involved and shit happens,
You
right?
know it. Yep.
And then people are like, "Oh, this is not the real thing. Like there's something wrong with this," right? It's like, no, actually, the thing that was not real was the idea you had going in, and now you're in the middle of it, and some stuff is happening, and you're starting to see things that you would not have seen before, that you may not like a lot, that you've been told are terrible, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And then like people will bail
They do.
and they'll do it over and over and over again.
Or
And it's like you
retaliate.
didn't even start the relationship.
That's
Like
exactly
as
right.
soon as it started, you
Yeah.
said nope,
And that's when
Yeah.
that's when the improvising is starting. That's when that tenuous, uncomfortable, bravery requiring, not uncertainty begins. Right?
You
I
gotta
was saying,
hang. You gotta hang in those moments where it feels like everything is falling apart and the void is opening up beneath you,
oh
and
God,
you're
it's so scary. It really
yeah,
is.
and you're like, and you're looking at someone who you thought you knew,
Yeah,
you know,
yeah, yeah,
and now you're starting to know them,
yeah, yeah. Or you're
you
taking a
know.
risk. You're putting a bunch of eggs in their basket and be like, please don't drop them. Holy shit. You know,
Yeah,
like,
and then you really do get to know like uh, what is fundamentally important, what someone said or what the ultimate like what someone ultimately ended up doing in a situation. Like you go through all this stuff, like some kind of a disagreement happens, a lot of words fly, accusations, blah blah blah, right?
yeah,
And it
yeah.
can be very hurtful and painful and confusing, you know.
Mhm.
But then at the end of it, like what, you know, where does someone really end up, you know? Is the relationship stronger as a result of working through it? You know, I mean, or does it just become something that's like another layer of barrier that, you know, like the net result is that there's like a harder incrustation than what was there before, preventing there being a real connection, you know? And I think that this is fundamentally like what everyone is battling with in relationship. Like, are you getting beyond the things that are difficult
Mhm.
and opening up that doorway so that the communication is better and the ability to resolve confusion, disagreements,
Yeah,
misunderstandings
yeah, yeah.
is improved, or are all of these things kind of becoming part of a trauma pile that gets kind of pulled out every time there's any kind of an incident, you
Well,
know?
it's yeah. You know, it's like I think we go into. I mean, think about it. Come on, would you sit down with another musician and be like, "I got an idea. Hey, let's start improvising. Let's jam, right? And let's have it go really shitty. So it brings out our flaws as musicians, so we get better. You know, you never do that. You want it to sound good. It's the same thing with the freaking date or the first 5 6 months of a relationship, maybe
Oh,
6 months,
yeah.
right?
First 5 6 months,
Yeah,
but you
you
know,
want it to go well. You need
sure,
it to go well, but
sure,
it's
but you
supposed to
know,
bring up your baggage. You know, it's
but but
supposed.
but you know, I think that a lot of the great jazz improvisers went through phases where they were like they were shooting for something that they couldn't quite get yet, you know,
Mhm, mhm.
and and being willing to suck, I think, is a big part of becoming a good musician. You got
Huge.
to be willing to just fucking
Yeah, yeah,
make mistakes
yeah.
and learn from them. You know,
It's
it's
so
just
you know, one of the greatest things. You're so sorry to talk over you, but one of the greatest things about music is also one of the most jagged and coldly unfamiliar and buzzkilly things about music for me, which is like that initial stage of awkwardness. And you know, there's that internal auditor watching it happen and listening and being like, oh man, this really sucks. Boy, you're really not compatible with this guy. Oh, this does not sound good, or this sounds so rote, you know. Oh, and then you just stick with that awkward phase, and then it's out of nothing something coalesces into form that has that's rich, that's great, you
yeah,
know. It's like,
yeah. It can. It's very mysterious how things turn around.
and okay, let's also admit sometimes you're just incompatible with somebody. Sometimes two
Yeah,
things just will will run their course, and you know, I'm currently with two people helping them get divorced, you know.
yeah.
It's just, and it's sad as hell, and it's what it is, you know.
Yeah, you know, not everyone is for everyone. There's no doubt.
Well,
There's
it's like the body. It's decay. That relationship had to die to make, you know, fungus and, you know, smelly, wet stuff so that new things could grow, you know.
right. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
That's how it goes sometimes.
Yeah. Huh.
Well,
Here
for
we
some
are.
reason, why do you have a Grateful Dead thing on your freaking wall there? You realize that's very prominent. It's kind of just
Wow, it's
Very
somehow it's in the picture.
hovering.
Yeah, it really is. Well, I can't say much about that because I'm supposed to be anonymous. It has to do with my wife. It is a favorite live show at Cornell
Oh
that
wow.
was playing while our son was born in the hospital,
Oh wow.
and this is his room.
Ah.
So she found a poster of that show. It's actually a pretty good show. You know, people you can really rank on old Jerry, but there are some moments that that band talk about improvising. There is some great intuitive improvisation in the show, I got to admit. And at first I was a
Well,
real disliker of the Dead, I must admit.
I'm not a big fan. It's interesting though. I married a deadhead too, and
Is she
uh,
really?
oh yeah,
Now,
totally,
now
totally.
that's freaking awesome. That just really, you got to tell her that I'm really pleased with that fact. Look, I had to be sold. Okay. You know me, I'm a prog rock nerd. I'm like, I'll
Yeah, me
take
too.
Rip any day over Jerry, but man,
Yeah,
you just
I
got to
mean,
give
I
her,
get it. It's interesting. They are kind of like the embodiment of getting up there, not knowing what you're going to do, but within a format where you fucking know exactly what you're going to do.
yeah. They also
It's
wrote some pretty good tunes. I mean, you can't deny there's some pretty decent songs.
like
Those are
what?
decent, those are decent American, uh, you know, uh, uh, you know, uh, that St. John's Band or whatever. I can't think of the name right now because
Oh
you've
yeah.
pressured me. You've cruelly pressured me into trying to sell you on the Dead. Which how can anybody fucking sell anybody? You know what? One thing that did help, I had a cassette player, and I had a Grateful Dead cassette lying around, and I put it in the player, and I played it at double speed.
Oh.
It actually sounded better. I was like, wow, this is actually pretty good. Like this was years ago before I had been sort of turned, you know, you know.
Yeah, I guess, I've kind of always heard that the dead can't really be appreciated until you go to one of their shows and, you
Yeah.
know,
I hung outside one of their shows in Albany one time.
huh. I mean, that's close enough. Maybe that's how it finally got into you. I can I can probably listen to two or three dead numbers without getting annoyed, but
Yeah.
after that, I'm just like, okay,
Yeah.
please, let's listen to something else.
Yeah. Lots of times I just don't like to listen to music. My wife complains about that all the time. It makes me think too much and I hear too much and I can't pay attention to talking or
Yeah.
anything else. I actually, I don't love it playing. I will admit I do have a classical station kind of going as a wallpaper sort of all the time.
Huh.
And over time, just like anything, you start to acclimate to it. And, you know, sometimes I think it makes me smarter a little bit, because it's a sort of, I don't know. Okay. Now this is a whole other can of worms.
Hmm.
How have we deteriorated? Like, folks used to have to, this is an argument that could be shot down so easily, but you know where I'm going with this?
I
Help
don't
me
even
out.
know what you're talking about yet.
All right. But like, dig it. So back in the day, right, there are these people. You once said that you're Mr. Han or Master so
Master
and so.
you. Master you.
That's the
Uh-huh.
ticket. Like, that was actually the sensei of a client of mine, Master Han. But anyway, Master Yu would said that our bloodlines are weakening over time. And there is this thought I have sometimes that musicians, several hundred years ago, all had to have a certain literacy and an ability to compose, or it's just, I don't know, ones that got popular, that written music it's just harder to do. You can make this really sort of reductive criticism, like if you take an artist who uses a bunch of keyboards and sounds, and you know where I'm going with this now. You know where
Yeah,
I'm going?
sure. Yeah, I mean there was real in-depth skill with the real raw materials of music, harmony and melody and rhythm.
Yeah,
And now it's sort of like, scroll through beat samples and
yeah,
get the one that has a vibe you like and then tweak it and see what you can get to fit in. with it
Yeah.
and then throw some lyrics on top of it with a pitch corrector. And,
Yeah. See, and then that I went to the Whitney Museum one time and saw a plexiglass rectangle with the most beautiful 50s Hoover vacuum standing in it. And that was on display as a piece of art. And at the time, I was laughing at it, but I'll admit that I stood there and stared at it, and it's the color and the shine of its whatever material it was, its body. To this day, I remember that piece of art, right?
hmm,
And
sure.
so it's like, what are you going to do? It's a tough debate there.
Well, you could say that all of that skill necessary to do a great oil painting produced an incredible amount of work that and incredible quality of work in some cases that in a way exhausted that field, and so it was no longer, after you've seen Van Gogh or whoever your favorite
Hmm.
painter is, like who's going to compete with that? There needs to be some kind of an other field that opens up that creates a new significance, where
Yeah.
people are going to compete in the level of a great beat.
Yeah. Yeah.
I just bought a drum machine. Uh, I've been so annoyed with drums when I'm trying to record that I was eventually like, okay, I've just got to solve this problem. I can't stand trying to fake programming drums,
Yeah.
using whatever the tools are available to me in the software. Like it
I
just
know.
drives me nuts. I hate
I
it.
know. I
And I
know.
can't afford to get together a drum kit and all the stuff necessary in order to record that and then remember how to learn how to play drums, which I realized a couple of years ago I really can't do anymore.
Yeah.
you know
It's really
so
hard to play drums. It's very hard.
yeah, to do it well, well enough so that it could actually, you can stand listening to it when you hear the playback.
Totally. Yeah.
So so I bought a device
Mhm.
that is really pretty interesting, pretty cool. It's an analog drum generator, basically. So it's not using samples, although you can throw samples in the middle of it.
Mhm. Mhm.
And it has an incredible like vision on how to control it all, how to sequence it all, how to create variation. It's a whole freaking world. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and it's like, okay, there's a system. It has in much the same way that traditional notion of music was a system. We have a notation system that's a very kind of regimented, like we think of it as being real, but, in the same way that the 12 tone scale is not the only scale in,
Yeah. Exactly.
you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
there's so
Totally.
many ways of organizing the audio spectrum, right? And
Yeah.
so we've had this traditional way of organizing it,
Yeah.
and you have the elements of, rhythm, harmony, melody, thought of as being separate. That also is somewhat artificial, because melody has to have a rhythm, you
Yeah.
know. Harmony really doesn't make a hell of a lot of sense when it's separate from rhythm. Like sometimes you'll see those charts where they'll put the chord there like a fake sheet or something like that,
Yeah. Yeah.
and
Yeah. Yeah.
like it really doesn't say what's going on at all.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, you know what the chord is, but it doesn't really tell you.
Yeah.
You're right. So in a way, the way that we think of like what real music is somewhat artificial, and like the fact that people can come up with, in the same way that there are these tournaments for a given video game. You know what I mean? Like I'm
Yes.
not interested in that kind of stuff at all, but
Yeah.
there are millions of people like enthusiastically tuning in to watch people battle it out on whatever the freaking
Oh
video
yeah.
is. And
Oh
so like I can see that this is a platform that you can do some really interesting stuff with. And there are people doing really cool stuff. I actually kind of like listening to little pieces of music now. I'll like spin the dial or just sort of randomly click on some music video when it shows up as a recommended thing, just to see like what's going on, like what are
oh
people doing?
totally.
And there is some kind of cool stuff going on,
Yeah.
some
There
some of
really
it
is.
some
Yeah.
of it's And like maybe not like 100% like, but there are things happening in a new way, and it's kind of cool.
It is.
And
I'm
I
glad to
don't.
hear you say that. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
no, I mean, I'm definitely intrigued by what's going on.
Me too. Me too. I realized last night I'm learning from YouTube, and I didn't like admitting it to myself, but it's of course, I'm clicking on less and less ASMR videos and sort of droolingly falling asleep, and more, it's like teaching me new cooking ideas because I do most of the cooking, but more than that, I'm finding all these really interesting little solo performers rather using strange new electronic piano like instruments. And
Yeah.
there's really cool, beautiful sounding stuff out there. And you can tell some of these cats can totally play the piano. And this guy was playing Speak Like a Child by Herbie Hancock on this
Huh.
thing that looks like Light Bright. It looks like an 80s kids toy. It's just
Huh.
like I'm like how do you even there's so there are these hexagonal buttons and they're all lit up and there's so many of them that there's like how is that? What are you even doing? I'm like looking at it, it's like, is there a hidden piano underneath that shit? And you're just making it
Yeah.
look like you're playing that? Like, it's beautiful though. Sounds
Yeah.
so beautiful.
In the process of looking for this thing, I ran across all of these little synthesizers that are being made nowadays,
Yeah.
and some of them are like really cheap, you know.
Mhm.
And there's this whole world of like boutique synthesis happening, and a lot
Yeah.
of those controllers. There's a lot of different types of alternative controllers as well. It's super
Mhm.
interesting. I mean, I find more often than not, I'm not that impressed with the musical content going on, but on a kind of equipment level, there's some really interesting possibilities,
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
certainly the affordability of some of these models is pretty amazing.
That's
You
pretty
know,
sick. Yeah. Yeah. You know what this guy learned the other day?
it's
We
that.
got to we have to here we go with my shrink language. We'll have to round off in a few minutes.
Oh,
But but
we're at that
but you know
point.
what I realized the other day? One of the best rhythm tracks that beats a shaker hands down is you just record yourself just strumming the guitar with your hand over all the strings and muted. So it's
Yeah,
it is the most tasty and letting your hand and fingers get loose enough so they sort of brush against the wood and over the strings and if it's turned down right, it's just like, hey, what is that? That's a hella shaker right
you
there. It just
know,
sounds so
the
nuts.
things that confer rhythm to a piece of music are can be so subtle and so profound. Like, you know, this idea that there has to be a kick and a snare and a hat and like the whole kit is really kind of terrible, you know?
I know. I know.
Uh,
I'm
some of the
so
best
guilty
stuff.
of it though.
Me too. And I was just working on something like that last night, and I'm just like, oh well, you know, this song needs it for whatever reason. It's kind of that's
Yeah,
how I hear
yeah,
it.
yeah.
But like working with these with the salsa guys, you know, and it really is just like, you know, congas and
Yeah.
maybe what do they call that? Guero? Guero?
Yeah, that thing's really boy, it's hard to steal a sample of that off the internet. I really tried very hard and could not find anything.
Oh, I'm
It's
sure I could give you one.
I wanted that so
But
bad for a couple of tunes. But anyway, yeah, yeah.
you should just buy one, you know?
But I
Uh,
can't play it to save my life. But that's not an easy thing to play. Boy.
I mean, yes and no. I don't know. You could sample it and then play it. I don't
Isn't this
know.
interesting now? We've really come full circle around to just being two music dudes talking about music, which is so satisfying to me. And I'm thinking about our listeners being like, now these guys were sort of philosophical a few minutes ago, and now they're just talking gear. But honestly, all right, one of us within the next 120 seconds is going to somehow bring this back around. How are we going to do it? Who takes the first turn?
Well,
Rock,
you know,
paper, scissors.
then we're really back into this question of, well, what precisely is music, and you know, to what extent is music one of those barriers that protects us from the jungle? How about that? You like that?
Yeah, right on, right
Cool.
on. right? I got
So we're back to our comfort zone. Like we
right.
ran away from the jungle, just like everyone does. You can only spend so much time in the jungle, and then you got to get back to safety. Talking
you
about
kidding me? Yes. I gotta find my controller. I already know where I'm ordering dinner from, you know?
controller.
Yeah, my controller. I like to control the television. I'm good at controlling.
And we were talking about the alternative controllers now available for synthesis and what have
That's
you.
right.
Right? And this drum machine is also kind of a form of controller.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
We're getting our lives back in control.
Yes,
you know?
yes. I gotta share this. That I would listen to a lot of science fiction books on tape with my son when he was much younger, and I'd be driving him to school. This is my first son, and one of them was called what's it? The Name of the Wind. It was actually a really cool book.
Very write that down.
Book. Yeah, The Name of the Wind is pretty badass. And one of the things that happens to the protagonist is he has a moment of. I'll text it to you. He has a moment of. He has a terrible traumatic moment where, you know, I won't spoil it, but he's totally alone and a relatively young musician. He was with a traveling troupe of musicians. That's what his family was. And he got separated from them. And he's alone in the woods with a broken instrument with only a few strings left on it. And he's terrified. He's utterly traumatized. It was an ugly way that he got separated from his folks. Right. And he, in the midst of surviving, just plays what's left of his instrument and the couple of strings that are on it and starts to vibe out with pieces of nature so intimately that he's writing, like he writes compositions about different plants and how the elements are affecting them. Like one composition is how grass of this sort blows in the wind. And it's not like he's trying to imitate the sound of that. He is making a musical representation of how that affects him, how he takes that in. I'm butchering it, but it is so beautiful the way this writer describes the way he uses his musicality to relate to nature when he's by himself and in a terrified, hyper vulnerable state, you know?
Yeah, well, I mean, you know, you could say like you before we're talking about like where do the wild animals bed down, you know? Mm-hmm. It's like, well, they too will try to find some little zone of control, you know?
Yeah, right.
And you know, everything is trying to negotiate the incredible chaos of reality with some little zone, protective zone that they can kind of at least have a moment's peace with, you know? And I feel like in many ways that is what music is. You know, people, you know, escape from the whatever box that they're put in their lives, and they go and they experience this feeling. Particularly if you go to a live show, particularly if you were lucky enough to be at a Deadhead show, where just everything kind of got. Yeah. I mean. I guess I think intellectually I regret not having gone, but emotionally I'm absolutely fine with it.
Yeah. Maybe I'm the opposite. Emotionally, I kind of wish I'd gone. Intellectually, I can get the same thing from listening to it. Maybe actually, maybe that's total bullshit. You know, another good sesh here. Here we are.
Yeah, that was really, you know, we didn't know what we were going to get into. We just jumped right into it. We had no plan, right?
That's right. Yeah.
We went right into the jungle and something came out, and now we've returned to the safety of our love for music and
boy, that nice,
and a wonderful friendship that has endured the ravages of time.
It really has, and it is wonderful. I agree, man. I agree.
And a fun project that we're going to keep doing.